Hello everyone, Mason here. How are you doing? Today, it's time to talk about blindness. I recently found a video by the channel Jubilee, in which they got together a group of blind people and presented them with a series of statements which they could answer on the scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree. Honestly, the questions seemed interesting and I wanted to go of answering them, and as we've established on this channel, I do what I want, so I'm going to. As stated, this is not my original idea and all the relevant links will be provided in the description. I have an open policy on this channel. It's a safe space. If you have a question about blindness, feel free to drop them in the comments section. Just be aware that the seriousness of my answer depends on the seriousness of your question. Right then, let's get to it. Being blind has enhanced my other senses. Disagree. This one's a pure myth, and I blame Daredevil. I don't care if the myth did exist before he did. He's still the reason a lot of people think that we're echolocation machines. Look, when it comes down to it, none of my senses have been enhanced by my blindness. It's just that I pay more attention. As a sighted person, I want you to think about the difference between the day and night. When it goes dark, and you're sat at home, alone, and a creak comes from somewhere in the house, you might not have noticed it in the daylight, when the sound of civilization was happening all around you. But at midnight, everything sounds louder. It's like that, but all the time. I find it amusing how much people think that this myth is true, to the point where people that I know in real life, and have known for years, have said to me, "Yeah, but I bet your hearing's so much better since I became totally blind." It's like people think that we've suddenly developed the ability to use sonar or something. Wait a sec. There's a wall in front of me. Cinder blocks. 20 feet high. Barbed wire on the top. There's a gate. Judging by the density, I'd say it's made of steel. There's 2 guards. Don't get me wrong, certain blind people have learned to use echolocation, and that is bloody cool. We've also got modern technology like the Sunu band, which does actually use sonar and echolocation, along with haptic feedback, to give the user an understanding of the proximity of their surroundings. Even then though, it's an acquired skill. I'm sorry to disappoint you people, I know that you want to believe it, but there's no magic, there's no superpowers, and there's no enhancement. It's just good old-fashioned paying attention. I prefer to date fellow blind people. Disagree, but only because indifference doesn't seem to be an option on these sort of scales. Why is that? Anyway, yeah, I don't think that I care. For a start, this is kinda not applicable to me right now because I'm in a long-term relationship, but my partner is sighted. However, I don't think I would care if she wasn't. I've thought about it for a while and I really don't think that I have a preference. In some devastating hypothetical situation in which Lee left me, if I was ever ready to search for somebody else, I don't think I would care whether they were blind or not. The only thing I would care about is if they were a nice person. I do understand why certain blind people would choose to date other blind people. There's got to be a sense of safety and comfort there. There's also the fact that you know that your partner in that case understands and relates to what you're going through or have been through. At the same time, I don't think that somebody needs to be on the blindness spectrum to understand what I've been through. At the end of the day, this one's just personal choice and there's no right or wrong answer, but personally, I just don't care. I'm not as shallow about romantic partners. Agree, but sort of disagree too. And if you're wondering, yes, my bum is sore from sitting on the fence so much. I'm definitely a personality first person. Even when I could still see a bit, I don't think I was that shallow. The thing is, Because I've always been visually impaired, I don't know whether not being shallow is just because that's the sort of person I am, or whether it's been shaped by the fact that I've not been able to see very well. Had I been fully sighted from birth, would I still be the way that I am? I don't know. I would like to think that I'm a fairly nice person, and I would also like to think that if I could see, I would still be a nice person. Don't get me wrong, I definitely did have visual preferences when it came to attraction, and I probably still have them now even though I can't see anything. As a rock music fan, I've always been more attracted to quote-unquote alternative people. I like the way people look when they have piercings and tattoos, when they have longer hairstyles and wear badass clothing, but I don't know whether that's because they're visually striking and were more likely to stand out to me with my limited vision, or whether it's just because I think that that's cool. When it comes to romantic attraction, I don't know how much of my personality has been shaped by my blindness. I just don't know. Unsolicited help makes things harder. Surprise, surprise, I don't have any particularly strong feelings on this one, and I'm sitting on the fence. I do think that I would lean more towards agree though. The thing is, this isn't something I've had a massive problem with, because when I was a kid, I was always with my mum. As a teenager, I was always with my friends, and when I got a bit older and my sight got worse, I had my guide dog Una. These days, when I'm out and about, I'm with Lee. So basically, throughout my entire life, there has been very few instances where I've been in public completely alone. Obviously, this has made it less likely for someone to try and force unsolicited help on me because they haven't felt like they've needed to. When it does happen though, I don't think that it makes things harder, I just think it's a bit embarrassing. Unfortunately, ableism is sometimes wrapped up in good intentions. Even if you don't realise you're doing it, even if you think you're being nice, sometimes you're just being an ableist. Like the woman outside of Morrison's a few months ago. Sometimes, if the supermarket is packed and we don't need much, Lee will nip in on her own and leave me waiting outside. On this particular day, I was just chilling, waiting, thinking about what I was going to write that night, and then this woman comes up to me randomly. "Are you okay?" she asks. Yeah, I'm fine, thanks," I reply. "Are you sure? You don't need help? You're not lost or anything, are you?" she asks in a gentle voice full of concern. No, I'm just waiting for my partner. I'll be fine, thanks," I reply, trying to restrain the scowl fighting its way onto my face, and probably completely failing because I have no control over my own facial expressions. "Thanks, Mum, I inherited that off you." Sometimes I get it with taxi drivers too, where they'll get out of the car, come round to my side and open the door for me like they're a perfect gentleman and I'm a damsel from the 1920s who has no idea how a car door works for some reason. The thing the woman outside of Morrison's and those taxi drivers have in common is they all think they're doing something nice when really all they're doing is treating me differently. I mean, don't get me wrong, the woman outside of Morrison's was way worse. I realised that she just wanted to be a nice person, but it was so patronising. Fair enough if I'd have been pacing back and forth looking worried and panicked, but I wasn't. I was just leaning against a wall waiting for Lee. Literally, the only reason to assume that I was lost was because I had a blind cane. Seriously though, people, if you see a blind person, or a disabled person in general, out and about by themselves, they probably know what they're doing. If they need help, they will probably just ask for it. Asking them if they need help isn't quite as bad. It might be a bit patronising, but they'll get over it. Something that stood out to me in Jubilee's original video is that a few of the people said that members of the public have just gone up to them and grabbed them to try and guide them to where they think they need to go. Don't do that, people. Don't touch people without their permission. You wouldn't do it to a non-disabled person, so don't do it to a disabled person. If you do that, you're not being helpful, you're just being a weird, ableist bastard. The city I live in is easily accessible for me. Strongly disagree. Oh my god, I have a strong feeling about something. I don't like it. It feels weird. Seriously though, as much as I love living where I live, it's not an accessible city. If I need to get somewhere by myself, I will get a taxi. I basically have no option because the buses are just not something I feel comfortable with. If I was to get on one, I would have no idea where I was and no idea where to get off. It still makes no sense to me whatsoever that we live in 2022 and there are no spoken announcements of the stops like there are on trains. Transport links are definitely something that I think needs working on. As for navigating around the city on foot, unfortunately that's not easy either. For a start, pavement parking is a massive issue. I'm 90% certain that there will be at least 2 cars parked on the pavement outside of my flat right now. The thing is, it's not a particularly big road, so if there's cars parked on the pavement, which there always is, I have 2 options: walk along the grass or walk down the road. Walking along the grass is slightly better, but it's still inconvenient at best. In the summer it's not as dangerous, but in the winter I have slipped over in the mud before. Walking along the road is dangerous for obvious reasons. It's annoying, but the truth is I can't actually blame the drivers because there just isn't adequate parking, and this isn't an issue just on my street, it's all around the city. Then there's the fact that the pavements themselves are poorly maintained. They're incredibly uneven with lots of potholes and roots growing underneath them. Even with my sweeping cane, tripping or stumbling is something that happens to me quite regularly, and I might not have face planted yet, but it feels like it's only a matter of time. That's if there even is pavements, because in the city centre they've dropped all the curbs, so there's no longer any discernible difference between the pavement and the road. I could easily walk out into the middle of the road and not realise until it's too late.
Gotcha!
I quite literally don't feel safe in the city centre, and I would never ever go there alone, even if I had a guide dog. Street furniture is also a huge issue. Between people, signs, bins, benches, bollards and lampposts, there are all sorts of things to avoid. So many obstacles. Then there's the fact that the local council don't seem to feel the need to deal with low-hanging or overgrown foliage. At this time of year, there are so many branches and bushes that either hang down and hit me in the face or take up so much of the pavement that we're forced to walk closer to the road. In isolation, one of these things might be easy to deal with, but as a combined force, they make it so that navigation is very, very difficult. The thing is, it's not just difficult, it's also dangerous. I'm incredibly lucky to have Lee to operate as a sighted guide, because without her, I don't know how I would get around, and honestly I don't think people give her enough credit for the hard work she puts in. On multiple occasions over the last few years, there's been roadworks, which has meant that there's just been a massive hole in the pavement that I wouldn't have known was there without Lee. They recently dug up the grass outside of my flat to build bays for communal bins. But guess what? Because the pavement parking is a thing, 90% of the time I choose to walk over the grass rather than the road. Without Lee, I just wouldn't have known that the hole was there, and I would have gone into it, and I would have got injured. So yeah, basically the city I live in is very inaccessible, and I wouldn't feel safe at all trying to navigate by myself, which really is pretty messed up. I'm offended when blind is used as one of my descriptive characteristics. I disagree. I kind of feel like I have to, because I'd be a hypocrite otherwise. Let's be honest, I've kind of turned my blindness into a marketing tool. For those of you who can't see the screen, I don't appear on camera. I have my screen blacked out and these videos are audio only. I do this because I feel like it creates an equal viewing experience for everybody, no matter who they are. The only visual thing that I do have is a poster that appears on screen at the beginning and end of every video, which reads, "A blind man's thoughts on books and life, from behind the black screen." I quite happily describe myself as a blind guy, a blind booktuber, a blind poet, a blind author. If I'm being honest, I use it whenever and wherever I can. There's got to be some upside. I'm comfortable with, and I take advantage of, the fact that blindness is my niche. It's what makes me stand out from the crowd. It's the hook that draws people in, and then, hopefully, my charming personality is what makes people stay here. It would be hypocritical of me to use blindness to my advantage, and then get offended when people use it as one of my descriptive characteristics. The thing is, there's a difference between online and real life. When it comes to the internet, I don't really care. If somebody's going to tag me in a video or give me a shout out, I'm not going to get offended if they refer to me as a blind guy or a blind booktuber. That's just letting people know that it's a thing. In real life, if I was out with somebody and they introduced me to somebody else as their blind friend, that would be kind of annoying. I have my sweeping cane with me, my eyes are closed, it's fairly obvious that I'm blind. If they want to ask me a question about it, they can. Basically, to sum it up, online, I don't care. In real life, I probably would prefer people first language. Being blind has affected my mental health. You know, at first I was gonna say that I disagree, but I think that was because I was thinking of it as being blind has affected my mental health negatively. I think it's fair to say that it's probably impossible to go through the journey that I went through without your mental health being affected in some way. As a teenager, when I lost the sight in my first eye, I do remember being quite angry and bitter about it, but looking back, I'm not sure whether the way I acted was due to losing my sight or just general teenage angst. If there was any negative effect on my mental health, I'm not sure whether that was due to my blindness or my attitude towards it. I was totally against being labelled blind or disabled, and in the process, I actually cut myself off from the blind and visually impaired community. If I hadn't done that, when I lost the sight in my right eye and I became totally blind, I might have had some friends in the community who actually understood what I was going through. Had I actually taken the time to connect with the community, I might have had some friends who'd already been on their sight loss journey and could have told me that it wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. Surely, there's nothing more damaging to your own mental health than not being happy with who you are and fighting it, especially when there's no reason for it. I am a disabled person, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's really important for young people to realise that you can embrace who you are without being defined by it. When we try so hard to be viewed as normal or average, who are we really doing it for? Our self-worth shouldn't be measured by whether or not we can keep up with abled people and do all the same things they do. In the end, the only thing you're doing is isolating yourself, and the only thing that achieves is to make life harder. As people, we're shaped by our experiences. Our stories are what make us unique, and being disabled just offers different challenges to those that able people face. When I look back on it, by trying so hard to be accepted and seen as a normal person, all I was really doing is discriminating against myself and making myself feel more like an outsider. No matter who we are and what challenges we face, life is always going to be much easier if we embrace and celebrate our differences, if we show ourselves the love and respect that we deserve. At the end of the day, what's the point in making life harder for yourself? Because other people will happily do that for you. In a massive way, what I went through in 2016, enduring the pain that came with my eye failing and becoming totally blind, has been kinda liberating. For a start, it taught me that I'm a lot more resilient than I thought I was. I tapped into a pool of strength that I didn't even know existed. It was hard, of course it was. The pain was intense and it was constant. Each day was a struggle for a while, but I kept on going because I had no choice, and I came out the other side a much stronger person. That period of my life was both a mental and physical struggle. I was facing the most intense pain I'd ever felt in my life and my worst fear at the same time. Here's the thing though, now that I am totally blind, there's nothing more to worry about. Losing my sight was kinda like being stranded in the ocean. I spent years fighting against the tide and treading water. It was exhausting. Becoming totally blind was kinda like being washed up on the beach. Growing up, becoming blind was my biggest fear. It happened, I faced it, I'm still here, and I'm still me. Nothing's changed. It made me realise that if I can go through that, if I can face my biggest fear and come out the other side with my head held high, then I can face any of life's challenges. So yeah, that was my long, rambly way of saying that I think that being blind has actually had a positive effect on my mental health. I have experienced discrimination. Strongly agree. This is a fact that I can't deny. Throughout my life, I have experienced discrimination in both large and small ways. Two things stand out to me from my time at school. The first one is something that happened during an art class. During this particular lesson, the rest of the class were using sewing machines, which my teacher thought was too dangerous for me to attempt. Guess what her solution was? I was given 3 things. The first one was a sheet of lino. The second was a sheet of paper that had a design of a lion's face on it. The third item, sensibly, was a knife. I was told to carve the lion's face into the lino. During this process, obviously, I managed to give myself a few small cuts on my hand. The teacher came up behind me and over my shoulder she said, "I'd hate to see you in the kitchen." Now, I didn't see the funny side in this and I told her that she was being stupid. At that point, she swept up to the front of the class like Professor Snape and announced to the rest of the students that I had no sense of humour. I was mad, guys. I'm not gonna lie. I was really mad. I told her, with lots of attitude, that she was thick for giving a visually impaired person a sharpened instrument and expecting them not to cut themselves. In response, she told me that her husband was registered blind and then sent me out of the class for having a bad attitude. The second thing was doubly disgusting because it was both ableist and sexist. During high school, in PE, or physical education, I wasn't allowed to join in with the boys, presumably because sports like football and rugby were far beyond my and the girls' physical capabilities. Instead, it was seen as much safer for me to join in with the girls doing sports like volleyball and badminton. The levels of discrimination just astound me. For reference, the ridiculous thing is, it's not like it was the 1950s or something. I'm only 28, so this was between the years of 2005 and 2010. I sincerely hope that society has come a long way since then, and that they would never get away with that these days. Getting a guide dog opened a whole new can of worms when it came to discrimination. I was quite regularly denied access to shops, restaurants and taxis, all of which are technically illegal, but that doesn't stop it from happening. I can remember one particular incident that happened not long after I first met Lee when it snowed. The road that I lived on was closed and there was no bus service, so I walked down to another road that I thought would be open, but it wasn't. I ordered a taxi and had to wait about an hour for it to show up, and when it did, well, an annoying situation unfolded. The guy pulled up, locked his door, rolled down his window and told me that I wasn't getting in with a dog. I explained that it was a guide dog and he told me that it didn't matter, he wasn't letting me in. At this point, I was cold and annoyed, so I put my foot in front of his wheel and I told him that he could drive away if he wanted to, but he'd be hearing from guide dogs and the police. I explained calmly that it was a legal requirement to let me in with an assistance dog. Eventually, he relented, but then he spent the entire journey explaining how he didn't like picking up people like me. Normal people weren't a problem, but people like me, well, he didn't like that. There was also a time when I was on a bus and an animal rights activist decided to speak up. When I say animal rights activist, I actually mean a nosy old woman. I was just sitting minding my own business when she started to loudly exclaim that guide dogs were animal slavery. If people like that want to get around, they should get one of them white canes rather than enslaving a poor innocent animal. Those were pretty much her words verbatim. That then opened the door for everybody else on the bus to start discussing their opinions on guide dogs, whether it was positive or negative, and needless to say, that was a very uncomfortable experience. Not long after becoming totally blind, I tried to get a job, and after months of waiting for a meeting with a specialist careers advisor, I sat down at the table with him. He offered me a leaflet and asked me if I was interested in attending a specialist blind college, and I told him no, so he said that I may as well give up because there would never be a career opportunity for somebody like me in our local area. When I'm out and about with Lee, people will quite regularly talk to her instead of me, even if what they're saying is a question about me. They will completely ignore me and talk to Lee as if I'm not there, and this isn't just members of the general public, professionals like vets have done this. There's also the jokers that think they're so smart and original by trying to make me jump. There was a time that I was waiting outside of a shop for Lee when somebody snuck up to me, got right in my face and shouted, "Wake up!" which was just utterly hilarious, wasn't it? There was also a time a couple of months ago when a teenager rode past me on a bicycle and screamed, "A car!" as loud as possible, and it made me jump because I had no idea he was there and it was a loud noise. I was extremely annoyed at my body for a natural reaction because it probably made him think he was so clever. Honestly, the worst part about it was my reaction. It was like I was a crotchety old man. I turned around as he rode away and shouted, "You smart arse!" I may as well have just called him a little scoundrel and shook my fist angrily at him. I think there's probably more examples that I could give you, but I also think that I've hammered the point home. If I could regain my sight with a cure, I'd want to. Strongly agree. I do understand why certain people in the blind and visually impaired community, and probably the disabled community as a whole, feel that they wouldn't want to be quote-unquote cured. To be honest, the phrasing is more problematic than the concept itself. The word cure implies that there's a problem. A lot of people feel that their disability has shaped them and made them who they are. They don't feel the need to change that. Even though I am comfortable with being blind, I'm just being honest, if you could offer me a pill or some advanced piece of technology, I would snap your hand off. There's no way around it. I would just love to be able to see again. It doesn't mean that I'm sad that I can't. I'd just really like to look at a cute puppy again. Question of the day. Since I began the walk to Mordor, I've been taking trips to the supermarket on a daily basis, which has made me realise that I hold a burning hatred for Celebrate by Kool and the Gang. I hear it almost every time I visit Morrison's, and I don't know how the staff deal with it. It would drive me insane. I feel like it has the energy of a Christmas song that you have to listen to all year round. So, is there an iconic, beloved song that you just can't stand? If you've enjoyed this video, the like and subscribe buttons are just sitting there, waiting to be pressed. Now press 'em, or I'll rob a bank, and I'll frame you for it. If you want to share your thoughts, or just get in touch to say hi and have a chat, you know where the comments section is, and the link to my Twitter can be found in the description. Thanks ever so much for spending time with me today, guys. Until next time, take care. For now, I'm off, and you should have a good one.